So we're starting with the top. It says Lo Yovo, top line on page 1054. Lo Yovo mamzer b'kahal Hashem. A mamzer is not allowed into the congregation of Hashem, into the Jewish people. Thank you, Justin. Gam dor asiri lo yovelo b'kahal Hashem. Also, the 10th generation should not enter into the congregation of Hashem. So what it says here is, a mamzer is not allowed into, literally it translates, a mamzer is not allowed into the Jewish people. But what that means is, this is often confused, is that a mamzer is not allowed. A mamzer is Jewish. If a mamzer's father is Jewish, his mother is Jewish, if his mother is Jewish, he's Jewish. A mamzer means somebody who is born of an adulterous relationship. Somebody who is born of an adulterous relationship. Now, that means like this. Adulterous relationship in Judaism does not mean a child born out of wedlock. A couple, a man and a woman, if a single Jewish woman has a baby with a Jewish man, even if he's a married man, that child is simply a child born out of wedlock. That means he has no halachic limitations or halachic stigma whatsoever. If a father is a Kohen, this child could eventually become the Kohen Gadol. There's no halachic limitation on him. The reason why if a married man is involved, it's not considered adulterous relationship is because theoretically the married man could theoretically marry two women. He could theoretically marry, so it's not an inherently prohibited relationship. A mamzer is only if a married Jewish woman is involved. Only if a married Jewish woman is involved. That means that if a Jewish woman who is married has a relationship with any man and she gets pregnant, has a child, that child is a mamzer. Limitation on a child's Jewish. He's got to put on tefillin, he's got to keep Shabbos, he's got all the halachic obligations. The only limitation is on him is he is not allowed to marry. A mamzer may not marry a standard Jew. A mamzer could marry another mamzer, but then their children are going to be mamzerim. A mamzer could marry a convert, somebody who's converted to Judaism, but then their children will be mamzerim. And there is essentially no way for a mamzer to get out of his mamzerness. He is once a mamzer, always a mamzer. The only way that a mamzer's children could become non-mamzer is if a mamzer is allowed to marry a slave woman, a non-Jewish slave woman. So if he marries a non-Jewish slave woman and they have children, the children are not Jewish. Then he could free the children and they automatically become Jewish. And once they become Jewish, they lose their mamzer status. But other than that, a mamzer is not allowed to marry a regular Jewish woman, and it is not a good thing to be a mamzer. Now, the ramifications are, and the obvious question everybody asks is, but it's not fair. Why is it his fault that as a result of his parents doing something wrong, he became a mamzer? All right, so the answer to any question is not fair. It's also not fair that one person should be born poor. His parents are poor, so now he's poor. A person is born with some sort of physical handicap is also not fair. If a person is born to a mother who's a heroin addict, so he's going to be a heroin addict. That's also not fair. There are a lot of things, I'll get to you 1 second. There are a lot of things in Torah that are not fair. It's not fair that you, are any of you Kohanim, by the way? Anybody here a Kohen? Me too. So what's your first name?
Shaya.
Great, Shaya? Mm-hmm. Great, they have to wash our hands, right? And we get to go into the Beis HaMikdash and they can't. Right? Now, it's not fair. I want to be a Kohen, but you can't be a Kohen. David HaMelech cannot go where I could go in the Beis HaMikdash. David HaMelech cannot serve the way we can serve. When Mashiach comes, we'll go into the Beis HaMikdash. David HaMelech cannot go in there. Is it fair? It's not. A lot of things are not fair. The question of fair or not fair never applies in Torah. A mamzer is somebody, now, you want the philosophical explanation, so you could always come on to, as if you need an explanation for it, you could always come on to the concept of reincarnation. That we don't know who this child was in a previous life, and in a previous life it could very well be he himself fathered mamzerim, then he comes back as his tikkun, his rectification, is that his neshama comes back, and he has to be brought back as a mamzer. Or it could be God decided that that's what he needs, an atonement for something else, or a challenge in life. We don't know. We never know in any specific instance why something is happening to somebody. In the absence of prophecy, we can only speculate on we know the general. I'll hold the questions for a few minutes. I'll get to all the questions. We can in the absence of prophecy, we can never say in any specific situation why it's happening. We know general rules of why things could be. So, for example, we know that in reincarnation, a person who is bad and immoral, specifically immoral, in one life could be reincarnated as a dog. Okay, now. being reincarnated as a dog is bad, right? Because when you are reincarnated as a human being, you do not remember your previous incarnation. This is all based on Kabbalistic ideas. When you're reincarnated as a human being, you do not remember your previous incarnation. You don't remember who you were, even though some people think that deja vu is reincarnation. I think that deja vu is simply deja vu, or it's drug flashback, right? It simply means that you are spacing out in the middle of a shear. It doesn't mean it's like deja vu. So that we don't know any, and you don't know who you were in a previous life. When you come back as an animal, then you remember that you were once a human being, and that's apparently very humiliating. This is Kabbalistically, that's very humiliating. And you could be sitting at a table listening to human beings talking, and you'd like to communicate, and all that comes out is a bark. Right? And so you could be sitting at a table, underneath the table, being thrown scraps by your wife and her next husband, while you're the dog sitting at the table. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean how's that for humiliation? Having said that means John Kerry, who's married to Henrietta Heinz or whatever her name is, so Mr. Heinz, he may have come back as a ketchup bottle. There he is at the table where John Kerry is using his Heinz ketchup as his hair, what do you call it? So that's pretty humiliating. One of the most sobering lines I've ever seen in a medrash. This is a very sobering line. The medrash says a man could spend his whole life accumulating money, only to leave it to. Now, if the end of the medrash is to leave it to his children, it's not so bad. Plenty of people do that. But the medrash says he could spend his whole life accumulating money and then leave it to his wife's next husband. And that's pretty sobering. It's worth being bankrupt. Better. You mean you spent your whole life making ketchup so that this guy could finance an unsuccessful presidential campaign. It's enough to make you eat mustard. Forget about it. Next time around, I'm doing this differently. So we don't know. So if you ever see a dog. Okay, so you've heard the concept now. So then you just wait till everybody leaves the room, and when you're alone with the dog, you turn and say, "Come on, what'd you do?" No, we don't know. We don't apply it on an individual level because we don't know. So there's an idea. There's a concept of reincarnation. So if somebody is troubled by the fairness of it could always be answered with reincarnation. Though in any individual case, we don't know. Hold it for a few minutes. I just want to get a very important point here. A person has to know, somebody who is a child born out of wedlock, a couple is living together, they never got married, she's not a married woman, and a child is born. Now this could be applicable in our day and age, where even a Jewish couple may have lived together, and they never had a proper chuppah and kiddushin. They never had a proper Jewish marriage. They thought they did, they didn't, they may have had. So I'll tell you an incredible situation in a second, which is in Jewish history, recorded in Jewish history as well. So a person has to know that even if he finds out later in life that his parents never had a kosher halachic marriage. So I've met Bali Chuvas who are often devastated by that. There's nothing to be devastated by because you are 100% kosher Jew, 100% kosher Jew. It may be a social stigma. It has no halachic bearing on your status whatsoever. That's number one. Number two, in the non-Jewish world, a child born out of wedlock is often, say a mamzer, how does the ArtScroll translate it? A mamzer. The ArtScroll simply translates a mamzer. In the non-Jewish world, it's translated as a bastard. But that's really not an accurate translation because in the non-Jewish world, a bastard is also referred to somebody who is born out of wedlock. And that's not what we call a mamzer. A child born out of wedlock is simply a child born out of wedlock. That's not a mamzer. There's a world of difference in the halachic ramifications. I remember when there was one of the Kennedys who was killed on skis. He hit a tree. I think it was one of Robert's sons hit a tree a few years back. He got killed skiing. He was playing football on skis. So David Kennedy, the Kennedys are Catholics, and David Kennedy was married. He had 3 kids, and he had a babysitter. And following in the rich Kennedy tradition, he had an affair with the babysitter, and his wife, when she found out about it, his wife was not happy. So they had some shalom bayis issues. And so what David Kennedy says, so we'll do what the Catholics do. Catholics do not believe in divorce. Catholics said we'll just get an annulment. We'll get an annulment. But she, applying keen Talmudic logic, understood what an annulment means is that you are retroactively saying we were never married. That's what an annulment is. Annulment means we were never married, not that you're getting divorced. Annulment means there was never a marriage here. And so she went into a panic because she said, well, if we were never married, what does that make the kids? So from a Torah perspective, all it does is make the kids born out of wedlock. Whereas from a Catholic perspective, the kids are bastards because they don't distinguish, you understand. But in the halachic realm, there's a world of difference.
If it's not a bastard, then can you explain what mamzer really means then?
What is?
If it's not a bastard, then what is...
A mamzer? A mamzer is a limited. In other words, our definition of a bastard, they're translating the word mamzer. But there are two. A mamzer is when a woman who is married is involved with someone other than her husband. That's a mamzer. Or incestuous relationships as well, but that's not as common. A woman who's married is involved with another man and they have a child, that is a mamzer. Otherwise, it's...
What if two Jewish people they don't have a wedding, but
they have children. The child is born out of wedlock. That's why I said he's got no halachic stigma whatsoever. He's not a mamzer. He's not a mamzer. A kohen and a divorcee is a cholol. The child of a kohen and a divorcee is a cholol, which means he is a non-kohen for all intents and purposes. But he's not. He's allowed to marry a Yisrael. He's allowed to marry any other Jewish woman. He's simply a cholol for all intents and purposes. He is not a kohen. He's allowed to go to a cemetery. He's not any kohen privileges. He's got no kohen limitations. He's simply a non-kohen. But somebody who's born out of wedlock has no halachic stigma whatsoever. Now, there is a case that I have documented at home. I have on my file. I have somewhere in my files at home. I can't find it. There was a case here in Israel. This was documented. It made it to the papers. A very strange story. There was a woman. A woman came to a Beis Din. A woman came to the rabbinic court, and she said to the Beis Din that my son-in-law, who is married to my daughter and they have 10 children, was married to my older daughter first for about 3 months. They got divorced. Then he married my second daughter. According to halacha, you're not allowed to marry your wife's sister while the wife is alive. Not allowed to marry the wife's sister. And if you do marry the wife's sister, then any children are mamzerim according to halacha. So what had happened was, they traced the story. What had happened was, this was an Iraqi family, and he was 17 and the older daughter was 16. They got married in Iraq. They were married for 3 months, and then they got divorced. In the meantime, the girl's family came to Israel, and they were living in Sfas. He came to Israel some 10 years later, and he married the second sister. How it happened? Don't know. That's what happened. Those are the facts. They had 10 children. Then this mother, the mother of the two daughters, comes to the Beis Din, and she says to the Beis Din, my son-in-law married my second sister. So the Dayanim said, well, if this is true, then the whole entire family are mamzerim. So then 2 weeks later, she came to the Beis Din. She said, I just have to add one detail I forgot to mention to you. My first daughter was adopted. I don't know if that has any bearing on the case. I said, well, that has a lot of bearing on the case, because if you thought that they're not blood sisters, so there's no issue. So I said, okay, very good. Then she came back to the Beis Din 2 weeks later. She said, I lied. I lied. Neither daughter is adopted. My son-in-law threatened he would kill me if I didn't make up that story. But my conscience leaves me no rest. Both of my daughters are natural-born daughters. The Beis Din investigated, and they paskin that the entire family are mamzerim. Now, what that means is that anybody who's married, any one of the sons who's married or daughters, they're married, if they are married, they have to get divorced. They have to get divorced. So it's a very, very severe situation. A mamzer is a very, very severe situation. So the Torah says a mamzer is not allowed to marry a regular Jewish woman. Now, there have been cases in Jewish history where there are mamzer. There have been cases, and it has happened where there are people whose mother was secular. Their parents got married, child was got married, they got divorced, they got married with a chuppah and kedushin, with a good Torah marriage, got divorced, she married somebody else, they only had a secular marriage, and then that child is 100% a mamzer with all of the halachic ramifications. So there was a heartbreaking case, a heartrending case after the Holocaust. There were certain situations where a woman disappeared. Now there's a halacha that if a husband disappears, so the Beis Din has to check to see find if there's enough evidence of the husband's death, and if there is, then the wife is allowed to remarry. And so she's an Aguna. An Aguna means a woman who is chained, because she can't remarry until they know if there's evidence that the husband has died. Now, there was a woman who was an Aguna, and there have been, the problem is that even if the Beis Din allows her to remarry based on the evidence, if the husband does resurface, then she has to leave the second husband and she cannot go back to the first husband. So there have been cases like that in Jewish history.
The second can't go to the
She can't go back to the first because she has been a woman who has committed willing adultery, even though it was unintentional. There's a difference between forced and unintentional. A woman who's been violated, a woman who's been raped, she could go back to her husband unless he's a Kohen. A woman who is willingly committed adultery, but it was unintentional, she didn't think it was adultery, she's prohibited to go back to the first husband, she can't marry the second husband. So there's a terrible case that came out of the Holocaust. There was a Rav in New Jersey, I think New York, a Rabbi Ephraim Oshry. And one day he comes to an elderly man walks in, this is shortly after the Holocaust, an elderly man comes in and he says, look, there's a young rabbi in your town, and it's sometime after the Holocaust, there's a young rabbi in your town, and his mother was my wife before the war. And she thought I died in the war and she remarried, and she had him. And she has subsequently died, and I am bitter. And I have one goal. The man was obviously very bitter. I want to destroy that young man. And I want to publicize to the world that he's a mamzer and that his mother married a man and when I was not yet dead, and so on and so forth. So Rabbi Oshry said to this man, listen, you don't have to publicize anything. The fact that he's a mamzer is already going to destroy his life. That means he has to divorce his wife. He's going to lose his position and so on and so forth. Those are the ramifications. But these were things that came up after the war. It was very common. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein himself permitted over 2,000 women to remarry. After the Holocaust, where people were disappeared left, right, and center, these questions were coming up all over the place. Men disappeared, and Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, his Beis Din, permitted over 2,000 women, based on the evidence, to remarry, and not once did a husband resurface. Not once did a husband come back. So they once asked Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, how did you have such a track record at 2,000 women, and not once, you're doing it based on circumstantial evidence? And it's a very tricky thing because you have witnesses say the last time we saw this guy, he was in the line to go into the gas chambers at Auschwitz. Then you have somebody else says the last time we saw a certain man, he was on the train on the way to Auschwitz. Now, is that enough evidence or not? He hasn't been seen since. Well, there are plenty of people who were on the trains and ended up not dying. And there are plenty of people who found each other 50 years later. So it's very, very tricky, and Beis Din has to determine based on certain halachic framework when you permit her and when you don't permit her. So Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked 2,000 women, how come you never had any woman go? Rav Moshe Feinstein said, look, I took on the responsibility of poskening the halacha. I studied the halacha, and I ruled, to the best of my knowledge, after responsibly doing what I had to do. There's no way that God is going to bring a disaster through me if I've done everything humanly possible with no ulterior motivation. So in 9/11, these questions came up in 9/11 because there were a lot of men who were killed in 9/11, and there were very, very heartbreaking questions. One man who actually called on the phone. He called his Rav. He said, "I'm about to die." Now, then he died, and then they never found the body. Now, is that enough evidence? The fact that he called on the phone, is that enough evidence halachically? Maybe the guy's got an ulterior motivation. Maybe he wants to mess his wife over. Maybe he wants to disappear because he's got people he owes money to. So these are all questions that had to be determined. There was one case where Rabbi Elyashiv was asked. Rabbi Elyashiv actually sent a fact-finding mission. Some of his closest disciples at the site. He sent them to New York after 9/11 because there were these questions came up. So there was one woman whose husband disappeared. His husband worked in 9/11. He worked in one of the towers, and they didn't find his body. They didn't find a body, and they wanted to know if she could get married. Rabbi Elyashiv said, based on the available evidence, she could not get married. He said, well, obviously he died. Well, not obviously, because sometimes a guy owes a lot of money, and suddenly this is his opportunity to disappear, and everybody will think he died. He get away from his debtors. So everybody said he can't get married. So they did not allow her to get married. About 10 months later, she was walking through a hospital. She went to visit a friend of hers in the hospital. She walks through the hospital. She looks into one of the rooms, and there's her husband sitting on a hospital bed reading a newspaper. She looks at her and says, Herschel, where have you been? Men sometimes disappear with the newspapers, but this is a long time, Herschel, where have you been? And he's looking at her with a blank look on his face, and she's just letting out. And then it turned out that he didn't know who she was. When the building collapsed, he got a clop on the head. He had total amnesia, he had no identity papers. He was sitting in that hospital for 10 months. Now just imagine if Rav Elyashiv would have just said, okay, we feel bad for her, let her remarry. And she remarries, and then the husband turns up. You understand? A posek has to go with whatever the evidence is. That's what this whole concept of an aguna and checking for the aguna and so on and so forth. Anyway, that's what a mamzer is. Okay, somebody had a question earlier. Gil, did you have a question? Somebody?
I did.
Yeah.
In the case of the child getting the status of mamzer, does it have to be through the actual act of adultery, or can, like, say, a woman go to, like, a sperm bank?
Good question. Excellent question. It's actually the question, like, let's say a woman is inseminated not through an act of cohabitation. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was asked this question. It's a very good question. And the answer is that he found a precedent for this in the Talmud, because the Talmud discusses a situation where a man has bathed in a tub and had a seminal emission. Then a woman bathes in the same tub and she becomes pregnant from that. And based on the Talmud, that child is not a mamzer. The child is not a mamzer. There's even a question that came to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein about a couple that could not have children, and the wife went to a sperm bank without her husband's knowledge, and she got herself impregnated because the husband could not have children. And she went to a sperm bank, got herself impregnated, and then became a question. Number one, what is the status of the child? And number two, does the husband have financial responsibility as if it's his own child to raise it, to pay for the child? So Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said no on both counts, that the child, number one, is not a mamzer, and number two, the husband does not have the financial responsibility because it wasn't his idea, it wasn't his idea. Halacha does not condone that, but this was post facto. This was post facto. And you thought that rabbis only get questions like, what happens if my fleishik spoon fell into my milchik pot, right? Right? How would you like to have to answer these questions? You know, they've had questions, they already have questions on what they call a surrogate mother, right? Or where she provides free womb and board. Right, and a woman is what do you call it? Is contracted to carry the baby, and now whose baby? And then they've had cases where she doesn't want to give up the child. Now who does the child belong to halachically? So how'd you like to have to paskin that, gentlemen? You thought that being a rabbi, yeah, once in a while I forgot Yalla V'Yavo. Do I say Shema Esrei again? It's a lot more than that. These are the types of questions that Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and Rebbe Yashivs of the world have been answering. Okay, yeah. Yeah, go ahead, the other
You're saying when a person is a reincarnation, it could be a dog, or the person that sees reincarnated in a person, he can't remember his past.
Correct.
But I heard hypnosis brings a person back.
I don't know what, with all due respect to anybody who said it, I don't know what was heard. I don't know who said it. I don't know. I have a policy. I don't comment on anything anybody else has said, because I don't know what was said, how it was said, what context it was said, how it was taken out of context, what his sources are, and the fact that they think that with hypnosis that's reincarnation. Well, maybe they're right and maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're bringing back something that he heard in this life. You know, it's all speculation. I only go with the Torah sources. I don't know what it could be. It could all be right. You know, it could all be correct. It could all be everything. But I only know what the Torah sources say. I mean, they've done in hypnosis. They could bring out, some guy, and all of a sudden he starts singing in Italian. You know, when he'd never been to Italy in his life, but you never know. Maybe he watched a TV show when he was little, and in the background, some guy, there was an Italian opera where some woman was wailing in Italian about how her husband killed her boyfriend, and he happened to he happened to hear that. He didn't even know that it registered subconsciously. So we don't know. We don't know. Okay. In any event, Liran, it could be that we were both around in a previous incarnation, and you owe me money, right? So that needs to be established, right? Let's get some hypnosis here, Okay, take a look at Perek Chav Daled Pasuk Yud Tes. Sorry, Chav Gimel Yud Tes. And it says like this, page 1056. It says, Lo siya kedesha mibnos Yisrael. A Jewish woman should not be how does he translate it? A promiscuous woman. She should not be promiscuous. This is a woman who just lets herself go with anybody. A man should also not allow himself to become immoral when he's used for other men. Then the next pasuk says like this: Lo savi esnan zona, do not bring the exchange of a harlot, umechir kelev, in the price of a dog, beis Hashem elokecha, l'chol neder, for any vow. It is the abomination of God, anybody who does it. That means as follows. A person decides one day he wants to pledge an offering. When the time of the Beis Hamikdash was there, a person can say, you know what, for example, a guy says, I pledge a I pledge a korban shlomim. I'm in a good mood. I did well on my test yesterday. I'm going to bring a peace offering to the Beis Hamikdash. So I have to bring a sheep. I'm going to bring a lamb as a peace offering. Okay? Now, imagine there's a woman, and a woman pledges such a thing. Where did she get her lamb? She works as a harlot. And somebody paid her for her services by giving her a lamb, giving her a sheep. A harlot is a zona. And what do you call it? And somebody has paid her for her services by giving her a sheep or a lamb. She's not allowed to bring that lamb to the Beis Hamikdash. It is considered not only uncouth, it is considered downright, the Torah calls it an abomination. It's abominable to bring such a thing to, where did you get that from? Well, it's like the guy, I heard a story, it's a true story. A guy was at a cemetery. He asked the Rav this shaila. He went to a cemetery, and he saw that somebody had put flowers on a grave. Now, the Jewish tradition is we don't put flowers on graves. We put a stone on a grave. We don't put flowers on a grave. You don't put a bouquet. This guy's at the cemetery, and he saw a secular Jew there visiting a grave, and the guy put a bouquet of roses on the tombstone, which is not proper according to halacha. So this guy waits for them to leave, and he takes the bouquet of roses, and he brings it home to his wife. He says, here, honey, for you. All right. What's the occasion? Just a Tuesday afternoon. No kidding. Yeah. Listen, I would go to a seminary to get you roses if I had to. And the wife never asked him, and he never told. Can you imagine a wife asking a guy, where did you get them from? Oh, I just plucked them off a grave somewhere. Could you imagine? Those would probably be his last words, right? So he didn't say anything. So then he came to Halachic authority to ask Halachic authority two questions. Number one, is it considered a deception? Is it genevas das? And number two, is it inappropriate to take it even if the guy made a mistake putting on it? That was the shaila that he asked. So you understand there's something uncouth. Certain things in life are uncouth. Where did he get the roses? I got them off a grave. You understand? So the Torah comes along and says a woman decides she wants to pledge a korban to the base. So what does she do? She brings the lamb. Where did she get the lamb that was hers? Give it to her in payment in exchange for her services. Torah says that's an abomination. Furthermore, for a few minutes. Furthermore, Torah says, I traded somebody, I have a dog, I have a dog. And I'll make you exchange, I'll take a lamb for the dog. And I sell you my dog, right? A dog is considered, by definition, a low creature. A dog, there's certain animals are considered, different animals. A lion is considered something honorable. If you ever referred to somebody by name, some animals carry with them certain connotations. If you're ever in business, say that guy's a real snake, right? That's generally not complimentary. That guy's a shark. That's generally not complimentary. If you say that guy's a lion, ooh, that's already, he's a lion. If you say he's a llama, he's a real llama. A llama, I guess this guy's chilled. This is a guy who takes a long nap after his chilled on Shabbos. He's a llama. So there are certain things to say somebody is a dog. Somebody is a dog, usually used in the feminine form direction, is generally considered uncomplimentary. To take something that you've traded a dog for, I gave you a dog, you gave me a sheep, and I bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, that's considered uncouth. Not only it's uncouth, it turns out it's an abomination. What's wrong with it is, the commentaries say, it could sometimes turn into a rationalization. A woman rationalizes, well, I'll go into this profession, but after all, I'm giving a korban to the Beis Hamikdash once in a while. And it serves as a potential rationalization for inappropriate behavior. Therefore, the Torah says you should not do it. Okay? Now, I want to go to the next one because this is one that needs a lot of clarification. Yes? A dog is a lowly creature. So if I get a lamb from you in exchange for a dog, what did I pay for that lamb? You paid a dog. It's just so inappropriate. It's so inappropriate. That's where dogs are considered a lowly creature. Dogs are considered brazen. Dogs have no sense of shame. Dogs will mate in public as opposed to other animals which are much more discreet. And therefore, a dog is always considered a lowly, brazen creature. Okay. Now, yeah, please go ahead, Justin.
I was reading the Parsha, and number 16, the one right above it. I just wanted a little bit of clarification on that one. Would that also include maybe a refugee as an escaped slave?
And here we're talking about specifically a slave. There is a special halachic class called a slave. There's a special halachic class. You have purchased a slave. There was a slave trade in the old days. What a refugee nowadays would be called, what category he falls into, I really don't know. Because now you're also trying to you run into a problem over here of superimposing a secular situation which never existed before, is he considered an escaped slave? I don't know. You have these, what are called the Erythreans in Israel that have gone to Israel. Very difficult to say with international law. They don't have passports, what the rights are, Very, very difficult. I couldn't even begin to speculate. You'd have to ask Rabbi. I'd be curious if you ask Rabbi Bradowitz, and I'd like to hear what he has to say. I don't know. Here, the Torah specifically talking, and in general, when the Torah describes a law, before we go and start making comparisons and projecting it on something else, we have to know yes. Otherwise, we assume it's no, because the Torah is giving a specific scenario. Okay. Now, there are two halachas here that I want to get to. Two laws over here, which are both very related. Perek 24, chapter 24, Perek Aleph, 1058. Okay, and both of these are issues. One of them is probably a bigger issue that you will confront or be confronted by somebody who's looking for an explanation. Therefore, it's important they have this straight. On page 1058, it's 4 lines from the top. Ki yikach ishisha uve'olo, when a man marries a woman and they live together, v'haya im lo simsachein be'inav, if she does not find favor in his eyes, ki motza ba'ervas davar, he found that her behavior was questionable. It doesn't have to be that, but this is one situation. The kasav la sefer krisus, he should give her a document of severing, what we call a get. V'nasan biyada, he puts it in her hand, v'shilcha mibeso, and he sends her from his house. That means, the Torah here is talking about how divorce is contracted. A man is married to a woman, what's wrong? I mean, it's the Torah law. The man is married to a woman, and for some reason she does not find favor in his eyes, and they have a fight, whatever it is, they want to get divorced. How do you divorce? How do you terminate a marriage? In Noachide law, a couple is married if they agree to live together as a husband and wife, and a couple terminates the marriage by agreeing to go their separate ways. That's under Noachide law. In Torah law, a couple is married through chuppah and kedushin with 2 witnesses, and they terminate the marriage through a document called a get. It's very interesting because the word get is the only time in the Hebrew language that you will find the letter gimel and the letter tes next to each other. It's the only time that you will never find a word where a gimel is followed by a tes. And what's interesting is that a get is the severing of the two. The two are never going to be together again. Okay, now a man gives his wife a get. So people ask all the time, why is it, no, it's not related to get out of here. No, it has nothing to do with that. Why is it that only, according to halacha, by the letter of the law, only a man could give the get? Nowadays, a woman cannot be forced to accept a get against her will, unless the Beis Din says that she has to accept it. By Torah law, a man can give his wife a get against her will. A wife cannot give her husband a get, number one. There is a Torah law, if a Beis Din rules that a wife is entitled to a get. For example, the husband's not supporting her, the husband's not providing her with her marital rights, the husband is beating her. There are certain times where the Beis Din will rule that the wife is to be given a get. Nowadays, since Beis Din does not have the power of enforcing it, a woman could end up also being what's called, used in the vernacular. It's not the pure meaning of the word, but a woman is referred to as an Aguna. She is a woman who doesn't have a husband, but she can't marry somebody else because the husband is holding her up for a get. And sometimes the husband won't give her the get until the family pays money. He's actually blackmailing her. Now, in the time where the Beis Din had authority, if they ruled that a husband has to give a get and he didn't, then the Beis Din has a right to beat him. And the way the halacha puts it is a get has to be given of your own free will. And it says, Kofin Oso, they beat him, Ad Sheyomer Rotza Ani, until he says, yes, I want to give the get. So the Rambam asks one of the famous questions. The Rambam asks, well, obviously he doesn't, and the only reason he does is because you're putting him in pain. So the Rambam says, no, that's not true. Every Jewish man wants to do what's right. But he has a Yetzer Hara, he has an evil inclination that is preventing him. So what we do is like infractions. We cancel out. We cancel out the Yetzer Hara with a piece of rawhide, and then what you're left with is his free goodwill in order to give the get. That's what the Rambam says. Now you cannot hire thugs. It could only be done by Beis Din. There have been in recent years, even in Jewish, within the last, even to our day and age, there are certain Beis Dins that are willing to give a rabbinic order. I've met guys who have worked for Beis Din. One guy who worked with a taser gun to convince recalcitrant husbands to give a get, but that's only if they're sent by a Beis Din, and it's a very, very, very controversial thing because you're going against the law of the land. But there have been cases where people are commissioned in order to procure gittin from recalcitrant husbands. There are people who do it without the taser guns. They just go and try to convince the husbands to give their wives gittin, and this happens all the time. So the Torah says that only a man. Now the question becomes, why is only the husband allowed to give the get? Why can't the wife? A woman wants to give by the letter of the law, she has to get him to give the get. Why can't the wife give the husband get? It seems one-sided, doesn't it? It seems very one-sided here. So the answer is very logical. Who did the marrying? Who married whom? He married her. In other words, what happens under a chuppah, when you see a couple get married, when a husband gives a wife a ring, what she's doing, for lack of a better term, we don't have a term in English to describe it, for lack of a better term, she is transferring ownership of herself to her husband. That's what she's doing. That's why the husband has all the responsibility in the marriage contract. He's got to provide for her, support her financially and otherwise, because he has taken her as his property, and she is now under his jurisdiction. Well, if you've purchased something, the thing can't walk away from you. If you buy a table, the table can't one day say, well, I want my liberty, right? You have to release the table. I'm going to use that as an example. Sorry, okay, you like it? A Rolls Royce, okay? If you bought a Rolls Royce, the Rolls Royce can't just leave on its own. You have to put the Rolls Royce out and say, okay, this Rolls Royce is Hefker. Anybody who wants can take it. So the halacha says very last, since you were the one who acquired her, you're the one who would have to release her. That's why only the husband can give a get. A wife can initiate a get. But that would have to go through a Beis Din and a Beis Din. I had a friend whose sister was held up I remember when they got engaged. I was about 15. This guy's older sister was getting married. She was about 21, and she was marrying a guy who was about 30. And his parents were against the marriage. I was at the wedding. I remember because the guy was dressed in white. He was so cool. He was so cool, all white. I just thought, wow, that guy's really cool. And a year later, they had a baby, and about a few months later, they were already separated. And for about 9 years, he felt that the family has money, which they did. And I think at the time he wanted $100,000, which is a lot of money. And they didn't want to pay him. So one of our brothers suggested just hiring somebody to kill him. which by the way, works as far as releasing her, but it's not permissible according to halacha. It's very efficient. If you kill the guy, so she no longer needs a get. But it doesn't work according to halacha. You can't do that, and you can't even hire thugs to beat him, because if a guy gives a get under duress, it's called giving a get under duress, that is not a valid get. And therefore she goes off now until you feel good. He gave her a get, but she's a fully married woman. I know one case where this was ratified by the Rabbanim. I don't know what the limits are. A woman whose husband also they'd split up, and he wouldn't give her a get except if she would give him some money. And she found out about his business dealings, and she proposed going to the IRS to let them know what he's doing unless the get is forthcoming, and the get was forthcoming. So that also required rabbinic intervention to know that it's not what's called a forced get. Otherwise, it's not a valid get. These are
money's allowed.
Say what? For the husband to take money, it's not.
Husband says I want $100,000.
It's perfectly acceptable. It's perfectly acceptable because then he's giving it of his own free will. It's perfectly acceptable. It's not the right thing to do. He should give the get once he decides to give the get. It's not a nice thing to do. It's not right. The get, it doesn't invalidate the get, though. It does not invalidate the get. The get is, but he should. He's being a jerk. But there are many husbands who do that. Some who even get married. There have been cases where a guy got married initially because he knew that I'm going to get married and we're going to split up really quickly because I want to hold up her father. And that was the most efficient way to do it. There have been cases like that. So a guy who does that is certainly not somebody you can give shlishi to in shul. He's not a very nice person. But to pay for the get, is acceptable according to halacha. But I personally know of cases where guys were. I know of one crew that worked for a Beis Din. They grabbed the guy in the street. They grabbed the husband, and they stuffed him into the trunk of a car, and they drove him to the East River in New York. They didn't say a word. They just grabbed him on the street, put him in the trunk of a car. The whole time they didn't say a word. They drove him to the East River. They dangled him upside down over the East River, Then they took him, they crumpled him back up, put him into the trunk, and drove him home. And a couple of days later, the get was forthcoming. The guy got the hint, right? And then I met this guy. He used a taser gun. And they said that they hit a guy with about how many volts? 5,000 volts. And while he is apparently it's uncomfortable, and while he is writhing around on the ground, they use subliminal suggestion, and they say things like, there's a Jewish woman who needs a get. And then the get generally is for it. But that's only if it has been condoned by a Beis Din, and even then, there have been Beis Din that have gotten in trouble with the law because you don't have a right to do it. There was a case recently where a couple was doing it. They're getting paid for their services, and again, it could work as a get, but it might be against the law, and you might go to jail. And therefore, and certainly nothing can be done on your own. Yeah, Justin, go ahead.
There's a famous case in the Americas quite recently.
Was it New York or New Jersey or something? A couple was
South, actually, where they would kidnap guys and hold them for a few days until they signed a get. They would just kidnap them.
Just kidnap them, and they got the hint real quick. Again, if it's not,
Arrested.
they did get arrested. Yeah, kidnapping's illegal. If Gil, I'll get to you 1 second. If it's not ratified by Beis Din, it's not a valid get. Yeah.
Just using the first example to illustrate that. So if the husband were to accept the $100,000 in order to release the get, would he be able to use that $100,000 to give it as an offering?
He could do it. Good question. In other words, good question. The husband can do anything he wants with the money because, again, the only thing the Torah limits is what the Torah limits. Is it a nice thing to do? That sort of thing. It's only what if the Torah doesn't limit it for us to project and say, well, this is it, because then it's almost endless. What about a guy who made money on a shady business deal? There's so many things where a guy squeezed somebody. So even though by the letter of the law he managed to squeeze them, and it wasn't, he didn't stole. If the money is stolen, no. Money is stolen, no. The Gemara says if you steal money to do a mitzvah with it, you don't get a mitzvah. It's an avera. But it's like making a bracha on pork. A guy is going to eat pork, and he says, well, at least I'm going to make a bracha on it. So the Gemara says, the Gemara uses that case. It's not my example. The Gemara says that's not a mavarech. That's not somebody making. That's a minnaetz. He's an antagonizer. He's a provocateur. He's antagonizing God. That's not a mitzvah. To do a mitzvah when you're doing an avera, that's not a mitzvah. The guy's going to eat a piece of pork, and he says, I'll make a shakol on it. That's not. So a guy steals money to give it tzedakah. We don't believe in Robin Hoods. That's a mitzvah hababa avera. It's a mitzvah done through an avera. That's not a mitzvah. But a guy who got the money, so at the end of the day, by the letter of law, it's not prohibited to go and then say you can't use it for certain means. It'd be difficult for us to it might not be nice, but to go and actually say that fits the category, we don't have the authority to do. Okay.
The Torah doesn't overtly outlaw prostitution, does it?
Yeah. That's the Kadesha. Yeah.
So what if a guy does insurance fraud, but then he regrets it, he does tshuva, and he has this money, he wants to give it.
That's a good question. What do you do with stolen money? What should you ever do with stolen money? Generally, if you steal money, you have to give it back to the best of your ability. You have to try to figure out how to get it back to whoever you've stolen from.
Insurance company.
Give it back to the insurance. The fact that they also steal from people doesn't justify you stealing from them. Other than that, hey, that's endless, especially for Jews. That's absolutely endless. That kind of rationalization, that's dangerous.